You are listening to Radio Maria Canada, a Catholic voice wherever you are. We now present the program Via Rua, hosted by Ana Rivera.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Via Rua, where we talk about God's breath, being the gentle creator of life and protecting it from conception to natural death. Today we have Steve Karlen. He is from 40 Days for Life. Hello, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. How are you today?
I am so honored to have you on. I am very happy to have you on. It is something that I was, I guess, in my head really expecting and really wanting to have you on so we can explain to us what 40 Days for Life is. So yeah, let's start off with that. What is 40 Days for Life? How did it start? That'll be like the first question.
Sure. 40 Days for Life is an internationally coordinated campaign. It takes place twice a year, once during the season of Lent and once in the autumn time. And it's 40 days of three basic symbol components. The first one is prayer and fasting. Pretty simple. Hopefully all that we do as people of faith is based on prayer and fasting as well. The second is community outreach to educate the public on the tragic reality of abortion. We see all of the different public opinion polls, and people will say, well, most Americans, most Canadians, most people in the West, they support legal abortion, but they don't really know that much about legal abortion or illegal abortion or any of these topics that we discuss. And so it's so critical for us to do outreach so that people learn the truth of what is actually taking place during an abortion. And then the third thing that we do is peaceful vigil. This is probably the hallmark of what we do at 40 Days for Life. We stand vigil, praying and fasting outside of abortion businesses for 40 straight days, all day, every day. In some cities, it's even around the clock. I know in many cities in Canada, you have the bubble zones that don't let you go right in front of the abortion business, so you just get as close as you lawfully can. And it's that prayer and that witness that has led us to see more than 25,000 lives saved from abortion at that last desperate moment, because a mother who was coming not because she was pro-choice, but because she felt she had no choice, decided to take up the offer, or just were inspired by the sight of people out there praying for an end to abortion. So that's what it is. In terms of how it started, it goes back about 25 years now to Texas, and there was a Planned Parenthood facility opening up in a college town called College Station, Texas. And the local pro-life community did everything they could to sort of rally around and try to stop this Planned Parenthood from opening. And eventually it did open, and in spite of their best efforts, they saw the number of abortions steadily going up. And so in a moment of desperation, they took it to God, what they probably should have done all along, right? But they spent an hour praying that God would show them how to end abortion in their community. And during the course of that hour, they felt the Lord place two things on their hearts. And the first one was this time period of 40 days, which we see over and over again throughout scriptures, right? Is a time where God tests his people and a time where God transforms his people. And so these local pro-lifers said, you know what, we are willing to be put to the test if that will help bring us closer to the transformation in our community that we need to see, which is the end of abortion. So they do something for 40 days, but what would it be? Well, it's those three components I just told you about: 40 days of prayer and fasting, community outreach, and peaceful vigil. They decided they would take on these 40 days. And over the course of those 40 days, the local abortion rate dropped by 28%. And so this campaign of prayer that was really just sort of a one-time desperation measure, they decided, hey, let's do this every year. And then one by one, cities across the United States got on board until in 2007, the first ever nationally coordinated 40 Days for Life campaign was launched in 89 American cities. And then The following year, it came to Canada. From there, the world came knocking, and we now have 40 Days for Life all around the world. We've got it across Canada, the United States, Latin America, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Australia, New Zealand. We've had campaigns throughout Africa, including in countries where abortion is not legal, but governments like yours and mine have historically been pressuring pro-life countries to accept abortion. We've seen 40 Days for Life campaign in countries that are not even Christian countries, countries like India, places like Hong Kong, places like South Korea. So there's the different countries, different cultures, different time zones, different languages, but one shared language of prayer to our one Father above in heaven. And that's where we see all of those many tens of thousands of lives saved from abortion.
Can you explain why you said abortion businesses versus abortion clinics or abortion hospitals? I think that was, yeah, very interesting that you explained it like that.
Yeah, and some of that might be because I'm here in the US, because there are hospitals that do abortions here in the United States, but I know it's more common in Canada. We have Planned Parenthood, the biggest abortion chain in the United States of America. They do 400,000 abortions every year, and they're a business. They're a non-profit, a not-for-profit model, but that's a tax status. It doesn't really mean there isn't money changing hands. There's a lot of money that changes hands through abortion, not just from the businesses or the hospitals that are getting the funding. I know in Canada, a lot of it's coming from the government, not necessarily directly from the abortion client, but people are getting paid to do this. And the abortion doctors and the abortion workers that we've spoken with have said, look, if we can talk all day long about how this is a women's rights issue and it's for public health and all of those sorts of things. But they say, if I wasn't getting paid, I wouldn't walk in and spend my Saturday doing abortions, or I wouldn't come in the evenings and do abortions to make some extra money, or I wouldn't be a full-time abortion doctor. I wouldn't do this for free out of the supposed goodness of my heart. They said it's the money that leads us to do it. And so that's why we talk about it in business terms.
Yeah, that's very interesting because here in Canada, we say it as healthcare. We say that because it should be for a woman's health, it should be for that reason. We want to protect her life, that they should have the right to have an abortion.
Well, that's the tragic thing, right? Is you can frame it as healthcare, but does anybody stop when they say that and consider what is healthcare? I suppose there are probably a variety of different ways that you could define it, but I think that most people would say that healthcare is designed to restore and preserve the proper healthy functioning of the human body and its systems. And does abortion do that? No, abortion, frankly, does the exact opposite. Abortion takes a woman's healthily functioning reproductive system and it breaks it, and it does so deliberately. And I think that's why we see so many complications and side effects of it, because when you're breaking a healthy functioning system, bad things happen. We just had a tremendous study come out here in the United States just earlier this month that showed that our Food and Drug Administration, which approved the use of the abortion pill, they officially show on the label that you get on the pills to do abortions, they say it's a 0.5% complication rate. So this group here in the US went through and they just looked at publicly available records and they said, actually, we're showing 11% complication rate. And those are not just minor complications. Those were classified as severe or life-threatening. 5% of women who take the abortion pill going to the emergency room. We're seeing significant amounts of hemorrhaging. We're seeing, I think it was about 3% of these abortions done through the pill don't even complete with the pill, and they have to go in and have an invasive surgery to finish off the abortion. And so it is absolutely not healthcare. I know I'm on a little bit of a soapbox here, but I think it's so important for Canadians to recognize that this myth that abortion is healthcare is just that. It's a myth.
That is correct. I agree. I think we have to be educated what abortion actually is, even just with the abortion pill becoming so prominent, but also, yeah, like knowing what the procedure is. I don't know if you want to also explain how women can have other abortions, because maybe I know some people probably don't really know.
There's a variety of different surgical abortions, and it'd be tough to get into all of them. Perhaps the most frequent is suction abortion, essentially sucking the unborn baby out of the womb. And I would encourage anybody, whether you want to know more about how that takes place or you want to know more about how the abortion pill works, uh, the film Unplanned by the former Planned Parenthood abortion worker Abby Johnson shows what both of them look like. They're not real abortions, they're sort of like animated or depicted, but they're very realistic depictions of what abortion actually is. And I think that's so important for us to see, because every industry loves to talk about their product. If you are a car manufacturer, you love to talk about your cars and the latest things that they can do and the technology and the safety features that you have implemented. The abortion industry, whether it's a business based model or a hospital based model, the abortion industry does not like to talk about abortion. And that's why they cloak it in euphemisms. It's choice, it's reproductive justice, it's healthcare. They don't want to talk about what abortion actually is. And so they're terrified when people discuss it and when people show what it is. There's another group that we work with very often, Live Action. I'm sure you're familiar with them. And Live Action and Lila Rose have just simply put out sort of animated videos with an abortion doctor showing what it looks like and how it takes place. And those videos have changed a lot of hearts, because when you can no longer hide behind catchphrases and slogans, people think about abortion. And the more that people think about abortion, the more they learn about it. And the more people learn and know about abortion, the more they reject abortion.
So with this rejection, why do you think other states wanted to get involved with 40 Days for Life? And then to further that question, how can somebody in Canada get involved with 40 Days for Life?
So I think people wanted to get involved because they saw that number, the 28% drop in the abortion rate, and it brought them hope. And this is ultimately why I got involved in 40 Days for Life. I didn't start 40 Days for Life. I wasn't there for that first vigil, but I learned about it and I got on board because I've always been pro-life my entire life. And for much of my life, I never did anything about it. And maybe that's because I was lazy. Maybe it's because I didn't know what to do to make a difference. But for one reason or another, I never got involved. And once I finally realized, hey, this 40 Days for Life, it works. It saves babies. It touches hearts. It converts abortion workers such that they leave their jobs. All of these good things happen. It was an encouragement to me that I didn't have to rely on politicians to end abortion. There was something that I could do right where I live. It didn't cost me any money. It didn't require any special knowledge or training. Anybody can go out and pray. And so that's why I got involved. And I think that's why it spread so much around the world. And in terms of how people can get involved, we have here in June, we accept applications. If somebody wants to lead a 40 Days for Life vigil where they live in whatever city it might be, they can go to 40daysforlife.com/apply during the month of June, and they can submit an application. And once somebody's application is approved, what we do is we provide training. It's comprehensive video-based training. You've got staff support from me and from our 40 Days for Life headquarters team. We've got mentoring available. We've got resources. We've got all sorts of different things so that you're not starting from scratch. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so, like I said, I would encourage anyone who thinks, gosh, I'd like to see the number of abortions drop where I live during this month of June. Go to 40daysforlife.com/apply. Our upcoming vigil will be September 24th through November 2nd. And so you got plenty of time to go through the training, ask your questions, build your team, all of those sorts of things.
That is really amazing that, like you said, it's day-to-day people that can have an impact on the rates of abortion. I think it's somebody that had never gotten involved before, and to know that it's making a difference, I think, like you said, would really motivate anybody. I would like to note that in Canada, the bubble zones does depend if the hospital or the clinic have applied. So up to my knowledge, I think there's 3 or 4 right now that have applied. So for example, in Hamilton, we do it outside of McMaster Children's Hospital, and we're like right in front of the hospital. Like we're not too far. I think, I don't know how many meters the actual bubble zone is, but that means that there is a way that you can be really close and right there in front of this building that is creating such evil for our world and for our children. Another question is, yeah, you mentioned that you were always pro-life. Did you do anything else that you could say that was making an impact in the pro-life movement in the US? Or would you say that this is what actually kind of prompted you to take that action?
This was my entry point. Maybe previously I maybe wrote a small check. I guess that I'm dating myself, aren't I? Nobody uses checks anymore. It's all Venmo, right? Whatever. I wrote a check to our local pregnancy help center once, and that's a great thing to do. I think every pro-lifer should be supporting their local pregnancy help center, but it was still sort of me delegating my responsibility out to somebody else. And so this was the first way that I really got involved. And I think that once somebody gets involved in 40 Days for Life, it's for so many people, it's the first thing that they do in the pro-life movement. It very rarely is their
Mhm.
last. So many people who have led 40 Days for Life vigils or participated in 40 Days for Life vigils have then gone on to start new pregnancy centers or new post abortion healing ministries, or they've gotten involved in the political process or the legislative process or outreach or all those sorts of different things. And so I've been involved in many different facets of the pro life movement since, but it was only when I went out to the sidewalk to pray. And I think that should not be a surprise to us because prayer it drives
Mm.
everything. And I think when we enter into prayer, that's when we best hear the Lord's voice. How is he calling us to do more? Where is he calling us to apply our specific gifts? Maybe it's those things I mentioned before. For many people, we've had a lot of people who have said, I don't know if I could ever go out and pray for an end to abortion. Oh, well,
Mm.
just try one time. Just try one time. And if you don't want to come back, that's okay. And you know what? They don't after that, they come out one time, they come back, and then they get trained to do sidewalk counseling, sidewalk outreach. And they're out there having these conversations. I've got a friend named Dan here in the States. He was invited to do 40 Days for Life. He said, I'd rather have all of my wisdom teeth pulled without any medication than go out and do this 40 Days for Life. His friend said, hey, just come once. And the guy said, Dan said, if I come once, will you stop bothering me? I'm never going to come again. Dan has since
Oh,
saved like 2,000 babies from abortion because the Lord kept calling him back out there again and again and again. 2,000 babies.
is it like that mothers stopped and then they were like asking questions that they know was 2000? Or like how did they know it
They
was?
those are the ones that they've confirmed. So where the moms
Oh,
accept the
wow.
offer of help and they go
That's
over to the
amazing.
pregnancy help center, or maybe they follow it up. Sometimes they follow up months or even years later. They'll come back and oh, thank you for
Mm.
being here because I saw you out here. I chose life for my baby. Wouldn't you like to meet my little boy, or wouldn't you like to look at my phone? I got this photo of my daughter. She plays soccer now. This is happening all the time. I mean, most people are not going to see thousands of babies saved, but he's out there all the time, and they are able to provide help to women in need of it. And here's a great story because we're talking about Dan. They had a vigil on Good Friday a few years ago, on Good Friday, and they're out there praying the Stations of the Cross.
Mm.
And suddenly the electricity goes out for the entire neighborhood, except miraculously for the pregnancy help center, which was on the same grid. And so all of a sudden, you've got these women who are in the waiting room about to abort their babies. They come streaming out, and he just directs them one after another across the street to the pregnancy help center, where a lot of them ended up choosing life.
Wow, that right there is a story. We hope and we pray that it happens more than once. That would be great. Like just, by the Holy Spirit, more power outages throughout neighborhoods. That would be amazing. And I guess like when you first learned about it, were you afraid to actually like publicly pray? Because I feel like that's like the number one thing that can cross our minds. We're gonna be public, we're gonna be religious, like people are gonna know that we're also trying to stop abortion, but we're going to do it in a way that's not expected. So, yeah, like what was your experience like?
My first time, I'm going to have to make a confession here. This is very, very lame. So just keep it between you and me. No, nobody
Yeah,
share it with
nobody else
anybody.
listen.
No, my wife asked me to go the first time. It was a spring Saturday morning. I'm a big baseball fan. I love to watch baseball. The season had just started, and I was like, I'm just going to sit on my couch and I'm going to watch baseball today. It's going to be great. And my wife said, well, I thought maybe we'd go to the 40 Days for Life vigil. And I was like, oh, so like, well, it's really cold. We had a newborn. He was like 6 months old or something like that. No, he was about a year old. He's about a year old. And I said, it's too cold. We can't take the baby out in the cold. And my wife said, well, actually, it's nice today. The weather really warmed up overnight, so it'll be plenty fine. We just put a coat on and we'll be great. Like, oh well, the temperatures might be better, but the wind, it's going to be too windy to bring a baby out there. And she said, Steve, did you even like look out the window? So I looked out the window. There was no wind whatsoever. I was so lame. I shouldn't be even telling this story. It's so embarrassing. And I thought about trying to make a third excuse, but I would already made such a fool of myself. I was already about as pathetic as you can get. So I just said, okay, we'll go to the 40 Days for Life vigil. And for me, it was exactly like I described it as being for many people. I went, I didn't really want to go. It was a little bit weird. Ended up seeing some old college friends who are very much pro abortion walk by and kind of look at us out of the side of their eyes like, what the heck are these people doing? They used to be our friends. And you feel a little bit of reluctance. But in the end, I oftentimes think that when you take that leap of faith and you go out there, even if you think it is uncomfortable, even if it is a little bit uncomfortable, it's a little bit like going to the gym. Like we know we should
Mm,
exercise, we know we should work out. We never want to. We can make a lot
yeah.
of excuses not to. But when we
Yeah.
actually do it, when we actually go, we're glad that we did, and we find ourselves being drawn back again and again and again. And that's what the experience was like for me.
And had she asked you like before, like in the past to go, or this is something that was very casual, like she was just testing the waters, asking you, or like
We had talked about it, and to be honest, if she had said, "Hey, can we go next week?" I probably would have been like, "Yeah, no problem." But this was my day. I was like, Saturday morning, I'm gonna sleep late. I'm gonna sit around. I'm gonna relax, and then all of a sudden, I'm out praying on the sidewalk. I was not yet ready to step out of my selfishness yet. So we had kind of had it on our radar, something we wanted to do, but we didn't know how to get involved. And she's like, "Hey, I found out that the vigil is going on right now, so let's go do it." So we did it.
and then after that, then what prompted you to get even more involved? Because obviously now you're very involved. And can you, I guess, explain what you do now for 40 Days for Life? Because I don't think at the beginning we kind of, I didn't
Sure.
really ask you. Yeah.
So I was moved, and we decided to continue going out to pray. And then the local leader of our vigil, her name was Amy, and she said, "Hey, I need help running this vigil. Will you guys be willing to help?" And so I said, "Sure." I was like the communications guy, so I would write the
Mm.
emails to the local participants, and I would write, things to the media if we wanted to do a press release or something like that. And so yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And then I had some time on my hands that allowed me to go out and do some of the overnight vigils at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, which I'm not saying to glorify myself. I just had the time and the availability, and it's actually pretty easy to be out there in the middle of the night because you weren't watching any women actually getting abortions. We just pray in a relative peace. And so we got deeply involved. And as that 40-day vigil ended, Amy said that she was going to be getting married after the vigil, and that she and her new husband would be relocating to a new community. So she needed somebody to step up and fill her shoes, take her place, and lead the next 40 Days for Life vigil. And so I said, sure, we would be happy to do that. We'd be happy to step in and lead. And I was really excited about it. I was so excited that we'd have the opportunity to serve in that capacity. And at the same time, I realized 40 Days for Life is hard. It is hard to go out there and pray day after day for 40 straight days. It is difficult to put in the legwork that's required to find enough volunteers who are willing to go pray all day, every day for 40 straight days. I mean, each volunteer isn't there all day or every day, but enough to kind of patchwork the quilt together to try to create that unbroken chain of prayer for 40 days. That's hard. And so I was saying, I'm glad we can do this, but I'm glad we get a break. I'm glad that we have some
Mm.
time before we have to do this next 40 Days for Life campaign. Kind of just relax and recuperate a little bit, circle the wagons. And I always kind of think about, whenever I share this, I think about, there's that old Yiddish proverb which suggests, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Because here I was laying out my plan to have a nice long break. God must have been laughing because he knew what was about to come. The very next month, I got a call from an attorney, this guy named Matt Bowman. I had never heard of him in my life, but he called me and he said that he was a pro life, pro family attorney representing a Christian legal advocacy organization called the Alliance Defending Freedom. And then he told me he was calling because he heard I was the new leader of 40 Days for Life in my town, Madison, Wisconsin. And he shared the names of some mutual friends to establish his credibility. And then he dropped a bombshell on me. This guy I never heard of told me that my alma mater, the University of Wisconsin, where I went to school, where my wife went to school, where we met, where we fell in love. I loved this university. But he told me that my alma mater was in the late stages of secretly preparing to open up a late term abortion facility right on the heart of our college campus. We're talking about late term abortions that are so gruesome, they're so brutal, that they're not even legal in most of the world. There are only a handful of countries in the world that allow them. Countries like the United States, like Canada, like
Yep.
China, like North
North
Korea.
Korea.
When we find ourselves on a human rights list right in between China and North Korea, that is a sign that something has gone wrong. And so he asked me if I would, as the local 40 Days for Life guy, would I be willing to? They're gonna this news is very secret, and so they were going to blow the lid off of it, issue this big announcement exposing the late term abortion plan, and then he asked me if I would rally our volunteers for a vigil, a demonstration in front of the building where these abortions were going to take place, maybe a day or two after the announcement. And I said, yeah, I'd be happy to do so, but I mean, I'm kind of new at this. I don't really know what I'm doing. It's a work day. It's a school day. There's only 48 hours notice. There's no parking. I mean, how do you get the pro-life community mobilized on just 2 days notice? I said, how many people do we need to have to make this worth it? And he said, do you think you could get like maybe 20 people, maybe even 25 people out on the street? I told him I'd do my best. And it turns out the day that we were having this demonstration, it turned out to be our coldest day of the year. I don't know Canadian degrees, but in American degrees, it was well below zero. The wind chill was freezing cold, just ice cold. Like if you go out without gloves, you're gonna get frostbite in a short amount of time. So I thought nobody's coming to this thing. It's gonna be like me and like my friend, and there'll be like 3 of us out there. But we had hundreds of people all up and down the street, both sides of the street, wrapped around the corners, singing, praying, witnessing to the dignity of human life. That event that was scheduled to go just 1 hour was still going strong. More than 2 hours later, we had television news reports. There was the headline story in the newspaper the next day. And we were just riding high. And it was sort of a sign that, hey, we would have the ability to rally a cohesive opposition to this late term abortion plan. So we planned another event a month later. This time we had thousands of people come and march in the streets against this abortion plan. And it took us about a year and a half, but after a year and a half, this university finally dropped the abortion plan. They never did one single abortion. And so thanks be to God, the Lord has done great things for us, and holy is his name. And that sort of story, it drew some national headlines. And so as 40 Days for Life is really growing, it's spreading rapidly across the country and around the world. They needed some more manpower, and I was blessed to get the call. And so now I'm giving you a very long answer here. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's good, because it's good to hear how you got involved and how the Lord works, because I think it's very important, especially I think in a country in Canada where I see Canadians, they're very personally pro-life. They never like to go out there and show that they're pro-life. So I think to hear your story, I think is very important.
Well, it's a sign that somebody who didn't want to, didn't have any skills, there was nothing going for me. But if the Lord can work through someone like me, he's just showing off. And I think it shows he can work through anybody. And we had this big victory. And so I came on board to the 40 Days for Life headquarters team, where now I'm blessed to get to do pro-life, and helping 40 Days for Life is my day job. And what that means is a number of different things. When I talk about if somebody wants to lead a 40 Days for Life vigil and they go to 40daysforlife.com/apply, and then they're approved, I help with the training, and I'm there to take the phone calls when they're like, I don't know if this was worth it. What have I got myself into? I can kind of take those calls and try to help provide advice and all of those sorts of things. And I also do a lot of our content. So we've got a podcast, 40daysforlife.com/podcast. And we've got a magazine. It's only in the US because it's hard to ship internationally. But we've got all these different things. So I do a lot of our content as well, just really sharing the good news. I shared my story. We, by the grace of God, kept a late term abortion facility from opening. But stories like this are taking place all over the place. And we are seeing lives saved. We are seeing abortion workers leave their jobs. We are seeing abortion facilities close. I mean, one of the big stories came out of Canada, where last year, the first abortion facility in Canada to close its doors in response to pro-life efforts took place in New Brunswick, I think it was. And it should give people everywhere hope. It doesn't matter where you live, how liberal or progressive the politicians are. God answers prayers everywhere. And I think he particularly enjoys answering prayers where it seems like it would be the most hopeless, because then only God gets the glory. My city is very, very liberal, far left wing. We should not have won If I had been older and smarter, maybe I never would have even tried because it would be impossible. But I was in my 20s and my lower 20s, and by the grace of God, we were too dumb to know that it couldn't work. And so God rewarded our faith, responded to our faith. And
Mm.
I think that's one of the reasons right now where everybody's talking about that 3 years ago, Roe v. Wade was overturned in the U.S. Our Supreme Court decision that made abortion legal in all 50 states, it was overturned. And now our states are allowed to protect life if they choose to. And so we thought, okay, we will see the conservative parts of our country become pro life and they will end abortion. And then maybe a lot of women will be leaving those conservative faithful Christian states to go to the liberal states and have
Mm.
abortions. But we have seen abortion businesses close in Seattle, Washington, maybe the furthest liberal city in our country. We saw um, New York City. We've seen all the places where you would think abortion would have this bedrock of support from the people, and the Lord is closing abortion facilities there too. So if he can do it in Seattle, if he can do it in New York City, he can do it in Toronto, he can do it in Montreal, he can do it in Vancouver. It can happen in Canada. And in fact, there are so many victories in Canada. We've had a lot of lives saved there. So take heart.
Can you go in depth of the stories that I guess are Canadian, or even stories in the most, I guess, in the most recent campaign that have been, because I think you mentioned like other continents. It'll be really cool to hear those stories.
Sure. Well, the one I mentioned in Canada, New Brunswick, they had had a 40 Days for Life campaign there for a number of years. And I can't remember, maybe the leader moved for whatever reason, she could not continue leading. And then we had Ruth Robert, who I believe you know. Ruth came in and is like, I think maybe we could stop this with a 40 Days for Life campaign. And so she and one of her friends, they kind of seeded this 40 Days for Life campaign. And sure enough, after that vigil ended, the facility ended up closing. Thanks be to God. I mean, it happened right there. And that's great news. In terms of other places, I think a place that should provide particular encouragement to Canada is Spain. Spain has probably the most draconian bubble
Mm.
zones or buffer zones, whatever you want to call them, in the world. I believe it's 300 meters in Spain. And yet they saved multiple babies at numerous 40 Days for Life campaigns throughout Spain this past Lent, because God can answer prayers anywhere. He is not limited by our laws. He is not limited by 300 meters or 150 meters or any amount of distance, but that public witness and the prayers touched women's hearts and they chose life. One of the places where 40 Days for Life has really spread like wildfire has been in Latin America. We went from 10
Mm.
years ago, we had four 40 Days for Life campaigns in Mexico. I think there might be more than 100 right now. And they had this wonderful story where they didn't just save a life from abortion. There was a post abortive father who was so distraught. He was so despairing over the loss of his child. He was about to kill himself until he met the 40 Days for Life volunteers, and they gave him the encouragement
Healing,
and,
yeah.
and yeah, direction to begin the healing process, to begin just picking up the pieces and having hope once again. So we got stories like that. There's a story that I particularly am touched by, and it takes place in Australia, where there was a Christian couple, a Catholic couple, who their baby boy was diagnosed with some serious anomalies. Something was wrong. This boy was, if he even survived to birth, he was going to die shortly after birth. He was going to suffer all of the reasons why people say you need abortion. He's like checking every box on the list. And so the doctors are advising, they didn't call it abortion. They didn't even call it pregnancy termination. They said, would you like a pregnancy interruption? Like, what does that even mean? That sounds like you're pressing pause and then you're done pregnant for a little while. And then you can go
Mm.
back to being like, what does that mean? A euphemism. Like I said, they don't like to talk
Mm-hmm.
about their product.
Yeah, call it how it
And
is, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so this couple, wonderful young couple, like they're hearing this, they're
Mm.
getting the pressure, and the mom is saying, well, maybe this does make sense. I don't know. We don't want him to suffer. And at this moment, the husband, his name is Brad, he said, pregnancy interruption, are you talking about abortion? Because we don't want that. And the kind of light bulb snapped, and the doctor was like, yeah, that's what we're talking about. And so they chose life for their little boy, and their little boy was indeed born very, very sick. It was a
Mm,
long time before they were even able to hold him.
mm,
And they would come and they would pray for him in the hospital room, and his vital signs would improve. And, you know, they had all these little miracles along the way where the hospital employees, which were pushing them to have an abortion, suddenly this little boy is born and they are fighting tooth and nail to save his life. And they had people in their lives who were going back to church, and they had friends who were not believers who would stop at church and pray and light a candle and all of these sorts of things. And so their little boy he only survived about 2 months or so, but in that short life he had a bigger impact, I think, on the lives of his parents, on the lives of his grandparents, aunts, uncles, the hospital workers, everybody. His life was not a waste. He made a bigger impact on our world, I think, in just 2 months than many people will in 80 or 100 years of life on this earth. And so I love so many different pro-life success stories, whether it's 40 Days for Life or anywhere else. They kind of focus on like, oh, we got the prenatal diagnosis, but it turns out it was a false diagnosis and we all lived
mm.
happily ever after. Sometimes that happens, thank God. But we love to see these cases too, where even when the difficulties do transpire, those lives still have dignity and they still involve great joy because they are a gift from our Lord.
Amen. That it is definitely very wonderful to see and very eye-opening to hear stories of Christian couples that are going to the hospitals because when they hear there's something wrong with the baby, I think our mindset is that we would want the doctor to aid to that, to help us give birth to this baby. But I think sometimes where they tell us something different, we are kind of shocked by it, and I think we have to be very aware and very vigilant when they are using the euphemisms because sometimes I think because we trust, the white coat, we say, okay, they must be on something here, and I should listen to their advice. When
I
you were
think that
talking,
you are
oh,
100% correct. Forgive me for interrupting, but
no
there's
worries.
we have these professionals and these specialists for a reason, right? If my car is broken, I'm going to take it to the mechanic because my mechanic knows what to do. And
Mhm.
we should be able to trust our doctors in the same way, but sometimes they are uh, they are misusing their training not to heal but to hurt. So we give thanks for our good pro-life doctors, and we want to do everything we can to empower the men and women who might be misled by pro-abortion doctors to know that there is hope even in a difficult prenatal diagnosis.
Yeah, I can only imagine what goes through somebody that's pro-life and a nurse, a doctor, or even lawyers, right? Anyone in the law, politician, anyone that is an authority figure, I can see how it can be detrimental, especially right now with our country being so pro-abortion, all 9 months. But yeah, I guess this is a motivation if you're listening to this to keep going. There's people that support you. There's people that see the value in your beliefs and want you to be very upfront about it, even though it can be hard in a setting that is so pro-abortion. I guess my other question would be, since there's already some campaigns that are Canadian and some people that are already praying outside of the clinics, the hospitals, and let's say they haven't really seen any difference, what will you tell them? Like, what's something that you would tell them to motivate them to, yeah, I guess, open up a new campaign or just persevering in that campaign that they already have?
I would say the same thing that our Lord said, which is, blessed are those who have not seen, but who have believed. And I
Mm,
think that's so important because sometimes the Lord very generously will show us the fruits of our prayers. He'll show us the baby saved. Other times he lets us wait and simply trust in him, to trust and to believe that it makes a difference. And if we believe what we say we believe, we know that there is no prayer that is ever a waste because God loves these moms and these babies more than we do. So he's answering them in his own way at his own time, and we need to have confidence in that. And we see it all the time because former abortion workers have reported to us that when there is somebody out praying in front of an abortion facility, the no-show rate for those abortion appointments can go up to as high as 75%. And so I really think that there are days where somebody's out there praying and maybe it's raining or they're cold. They don't want to be there. They like to be with me watching baseball on the couch like I wanted to do that one day. They the car that drives by gives them the middle finger. They're not seeing anything. In that moment, it's possible that the car that gave him the middle finger was followed by a car occupied by a woman who was coming for an abortion until she saw you and your love and your smile and your faith. And she stayed right in that car and she kept on driving. We might not ever be able to count that woman's baby as one of those babies we know has been saved from abortion. But those babies who we cannot count are just as valuable, just as beautiful, just as precious as the ones who we can count. And so we think, I shared that number earlier, 25,000 saved babies that we know of. There are probably many more who we'll only know about in heaven. And so I hope that's an encouragement. I think that this mission is very close to the Lord's heart for this exact reason. There are so many different ways we can serve God and neighbor, and I don't want to say any of them are better or worse than others. They all are wonderful. But if you go serve at a homeless shelter, you might know that somebody has a roof over his head for the first time in months because you were there. Or if you go serve at a pantry or a soup kitchen, somebody might have a warm meal for the first time in days because you were there. And you kind of go home with a warm, fuzzy feeling of knowing you made a difference. If you do 40 days for life, there's no guarantee. It might happen, but most of the time it doesn't happen. Most of the time we are simply entrusting these women, entrusting these babies, entrusting these families to the Lord. And I think that makes it very close to the Lord's heart because we step out and we believe even when we don't get anything out of it. One story I'll wrap on this point is we had a campaign in, I can't remember which city it was, but it was a mother and a daughter, and they decided to do a 40 Days for Life vigil, and they couldn't get anybody to join them, not one other person. And so these two, they just kept going out and they'd pray, and they didn't see any results. And we're trying to encourage them afterwards, right? Like, well, you must have seen some little thing, like maybe somebody
Yeah.
smiled at you. Nope, nothing. It was a waste of time, waste of effort. Jump ahead 6 months, and they get a call from a pastor in their town who said, "Hey, we're baptizing the baby that you saved from abortion. Would you like to be there for it? The family would love to have you there." They, what baby? We didn't save any babies. Well, they saved one, and that family told their priest about it, and the priest reached out to the 40 Days for Life vigil, and they got to have that confirmation that even when it seemed like it was completely pointless,
Mm.
there was a life saved. And this was a long time ago. So that baby, I think turns 18 this year. So he'll be an adult. Won't be long, perhaps, before that child. We talk about saving babies, but now this is a teenager on the brink of adulthood, and it might not be long before that person gets married, perhaps God willing has children of his or her own. I can't remember if it's a boy or a girl, but ensuring that the impact of that mother-daughter duo leading that pointless campaign could extend into the future for generations.
Yeah, and just to know that even one life, right? The ramifications, not ramifications, but the beautiful gifts that come from just one life, like the grandparents, the uncles, the generation to generation, that, that one life saves generationally a whole bunch of lives, which is something that I think because the evil one is so ready to kind of, give our minds such negative thoughts that we're like, okay, like you said, I'm just gonna sit here and watch the baseball game that I actually want to do versus actually doing something that's gonna challenge us out of our comfort zone. And I guess to almost finish this beautiful, beautiful interview, I guess I also wanted to ask, what are other resources that people can take? Because I see you have the book, What Not to Say When, for 40 Days for Life. But what are resources that people, let's say, they're in the front lines, they're praying, and somebody approaches them and they say, they really want to ask, like, hey, like, why are you here? Or they say the lingo, right? Abortion is healthcare. Like, why do you want to take that away from women? And as somebody that's just starting to pray, they sometimes don't really know what to say or how to engage in a conversation.
Yeah, you mentioned the book What to Say When and What to Say When To. You don't have to read them in order. They can go separate, but you can find those at 40daysforlifegear.com or on Amazon. I think Amazon Canadian will have it, but you might want to double check. Otherwise, 40daysforlifegear.com. And that's a great way to kind of like have confidence discussing abortion. I don't think people actually always need to know what to say. It's that we all know abortion is wrong, but when you kind of get the tips, the hints, the tricks, the have this as part of your conversation, it gives people confidence that they need to discuss it. So check that out. Another thing I would also encourage people to do is 40 Days for Life University, which is 40daysforlife.com/university. And when we talk about sidewalk counseling, or we call it sidewalk outreach, we've got a little training course. And for just $5 in Canada, I think it's $5 US, but basically enough to prove that you're not a pro-abortion supporter who's coming in and trying to just take advantage and get the supplies and whatnot. You can get access to our 7 video-based training modules that really teach you how to have what we call the most important conversation in the world. That conversation with a woman who is on the brink of having an abortion. And most of the time that plays out on the sidewalk when you're out there at the vigil praying. But I think it plays anywhere, because you don't know when that conversation is going to come to you. Even if you don't go to the sidewalk, you might be at work or at school or at a family event, and you meet someone who took a pregnancy test and it was positive, and now she's got a decision to make. What do you say? And so I encourage people, even if they don't feel like they're ever going to go out and do sidewalk counseling, go to 40daysforlife.com/university. Take our video-based training module. You can watch them whenever you feel like, and then you'll be equipped to help that mother whenever she comes to you.
And I guess just one last thought. I was wondering, because we really want to know how to communicate the pro-life message. But let's say somebody that in your family or in your circle of friends is pro-choice, or when you tell them what you do, their first automatic expression is, oh, like you're pro-life. Like what do you usually, how does that conversation usually go?
Well, I know when it's at a family event on one side of my family, there's a lot of like, how's work? How's work? How's work? Steve, you have a garden, right? So,
Okay.
so sometimes it doesn't come up, but I think it's helpful to just simply ask questions. Sometimes when there's these hot topics, we want to like get our point across. We're so passionate about life. If I could just explain it to you, you would get it. But people don't want to listen always. They're just waiting sometimes for their turn to talk. And so I like to ask hard questions, and sometimes they kind of think through the issue in a way that they haven't before. Like we said, most people who support abortion haven't thought that much about it. They don't know that much about it. And so you might run into people, well, like, I'm pro-choice. Oh, so you, like all 9 months? Well, no, not third trimester. Okay, so you support abortion up until 24 weeks, correct? Yes, that's right. Okay. Could you tell me what happens at midnight on the 6th day of the 23rd week of pregnancy where suddenly you change your mind on abortion? Like, could you explain that to me? And maybe do it a little more politely than I just did. But in a lot of cases, we ask questions and then be silent. It's sort of like a sales tactic, right? The guy who's asking you to buy the car, he doesn't ask the tough question, hey, will you buy this car? And then keep talking. He talks himself out of the sale. I think we ask the hard question and then let them answer. And sometimes that plants seeds. Sometimes I've even seen people who, as they try to answer it, they talk themselves into becoming pro-life when they try to reason through it. Like, oh gosh, I guess there is nothing. And if there's no difference between 23 weeks, 6 days, and 23 hours and 59 minutes, then, well, what if we go back another day and another day and another day? And eventually you begin to realize there's no point that makes sense to arbitrarily define when life begins and when legal protections for unborn children can begin, other than conception. Again, I don't want to make it sound like it's easy. Most of the time we're planting seeds, but when you ask those tough questions to the people in your life, it gives them the opportunity to think through it. And I think they also see that your position, whether they agree with you or not in being pro-life, they see at least it's reasonable.
That's very beautiful. And I think, yeah, even for myself, being open to that conversation. And sometimes, because even for myself, I'm like, oh no, like they already know, like I'm the pro-life person, they're gonna have questions or just gonna be brought up. And sometimes all I want to do is be invisible. So I can totally understand how that could be a great turnoff. And I guess just, yeah, the last question would be, what would you tell a Canadian right now that is thinking about starting a new campaign? Like this is like your chance to keep motivating them and to get them on board.
We have oftentimes surveyed people about their experiences leading 40 Days for Life campaigns or just participating in them. And the number that we've seen is 97% of people who do it say that 40 Days for Life has brought them closer to God, has improved their spiritual life, their relationship with God, their prayer life. And so I think it's worth a shot. Now, some people maybe shouldn't. There are perhaps valid reasons for not doing it. I can think of a variety of them, but many people can do this. And if you have questions about it, send me an email, steve@40daysforlife.com, steve@40daysforlife.com. Me or one of my team members will get back to you in very short order. We will answer your questions, and some of them are hopefully going to put you at ease. Other ones might be one of those, well, there's no easy answer. It is hard. I can't tell you it's easy, but we can at least give you all the information you need to make a decision. But otherwise, in this month of June, 40daysforlife.com/apply, or if you got questions, steve@40daysforlife.com.
And I guess I knew that, but I didn't know that, yeah, June, like literally next month, within days of today, we're going to be able to sign up. I'm going to for sure sign up Hamilton again. But yeah, thank you so much, Stephen, for coming on here. Thank you for sharing your story, for your vulnerability, and for your motivation, especially from someone that did not want to do 40 Days for Life.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this work. And thank you for leading the local vigil. We hope that you have the most successful one you've ever had. And just as I offered to help anyone who's thinking about doing a 40 Days for Life campaign, let me know how I can help you in Hamilton, because that's what we're here for.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. God bless you all. Have a good night. Good day. God bless. Bye.
You have been listening to the program Via Rua, hosted by Anna Rivera here on Radio Maria Canada, a Catholic voice wherever you are.